going to start with the really hard-hitting question. That one that we got to ask. Has U-Bowl approached you about any of your properties, turning them into movies? Has anyone actually talked to you? Because I mean, your stuff is very, very cinematic. I mean,
yeah, we've met with a bunch of people. I think, I sort of have two minds about it. One is sort of as somebody who's supposed to be running a business, which is that a lot of these film projects end up not being very additive. It's hard to see how the Mortal Kombat franchise has really been moved forward by the Mortal Kombat movies. And then as a gamer, I think most of these movies are terrible and weren't worth making. And I would hate to see any of my favorite games sort of mangled like that. So we've tried a couple of different times to see if some sort of movie project would be possible. So we've had people in Hollywood try to do scripts, and we've actually taken a stab at writing a script, and at the end of the day, none of the movies were worth doing. So maybe someday, but it's not going to be made until, I mean, our goal would be that the movie would be as good a movie as the games are games. The episodic content will be better than Half-Life 2 was. That, they may be shorter, but the content itself is going to continue to move forward and hopefully move forward faster than we've been able to do with these large-scale releases. People really enjoyed the closely coupled interactions. Like a lot of people, their favorite moment in the game was playing ball with dog, and this idea that you have this other creature in the world who's interacting with you in this fine-grained way, where you're doing something and they're reacting to it right there. And so that's something we say we need to do a lot more of that. We need to make the player feel like they can rely on and are dependent upon other people in the game, and not in some high-level storytelling way, but in an actual, I need you to do something for me right now. And so there's a lot of stuff where you can't do anything, you're relying on Alex to do it for you, and what you can do is get her to do stuff for you. So you're feeling like the two of you are working closely together.
That's really interesting, because that's, at least in terms of console games, that's almost the opposite of the paradigm, where you have a helpless sort of female consort, that you're guiding through things. Resident Evil 4 was one of the more recent things to add that. Prince of Persia did.
You don't want to have the sense that there's a box around the NPC, and you see these boxes bumping into each other. You want to have a sense that they're in the world, interacting with things closely. Like they can reach out to stuff, they can push things to the ground, they can kick things, stuff like that, and have it not be that sort of fakey box interaction. There's this technology that was really exciting that I'd like to see us get into production, which is a different approach to rendering complexity, moving things into and out of an image domain, and then seamlessly interpolating between those motions as you move around. So everything close to you is physical and is geometry, and everything really far away from you is an image, but you have no way of telling that if you do it properly, and things can fly out and come back. So as far as you're concerned, it all feels like world to you. But as far as your rendering is concerned, you're keeping your polygon budgets and your shader budgets and your fill rates under control. We're focusing on things that have more obvious gameplay significance, like NPCs and vehicles and stuff like that earlier, because it's always good to do gameplay stuff. But I would like us to come back to that. I'd love to be able to put people down into cities where they can navigate the entire city and have them feel like, oh my God, there's a huge amount of stuff going on around me, and I can walk, anything I can see, I can walk over, and in the background that stuff is going from being essentially a skybox to sort of a low-res version of geometry to a high-res version of geometry as I get closer to it. What do you think of Lost Coast?
It looks great. I mean, you can tell the difference in 2 seconds. And actually, I was just when I was playing on a DoD source between a non-HDR machine and an HDR machine, it looked really good. You can tell the difference in like a second.
Good.
And the director's sort of like documentary notes and stuff. I think it's a great idea.
Great.
Incorporate that into more games. I think.
Well, hopefully that'll be like a standard feature of all of our stuff now.
Right.
That's the thing is we like being able to get stuff out to people like HDR. We can solve all the technical problems, get it out, and make sure it works with everybody's display adapters, and then DoD takes advantage of it right away. So rather than waiting until Half-Life 3 ships for our multiplayer games to get a feature like HDR, we can do it in Lost Coast, and then DoD source picks it up right away. So HDR now, and maybe this image-based rendering stuff later, but it does make it possible for us to do that. The thing that we don't understand that's going to be really interesting is it's like the entire industry has been making feature films, right? And the door is starting to open for TV shows, right? And TV shows are totally different than movies in terms of the people who are good at it and how you structure them. And in movies it's directors that are preeminent. In TV shows it's the head writer, the showrunner who's preeminent. I think we'll all be learning a lot. It's like, do we need to release 22 times a year? Does it need to be a TV show? Is it once a week is the sort of the important frequency of releasing, or is once a quarter okay? There were two sort of big, sort of painful periods for Steam. One was when it went from being optional to being the way that everybody needed to get updates. And that was pretty painful for people. And then the Half-Life 2 launch where we got swamped with not having enough capacity. So those are both painful memories for us. And at least right now we're not setting anybody on fire. We seem to be getting updates out on a really regular basis. We seem to have that process really smooth right now. Right now we're sort of re-architecting Steam. So people are actually running two versions of Steam right now. They may not realize that, but they're running Steam 2 and Steam 3 alongside of each other. The nice thing about having a system like this is that there's no reason not to have your old system and your new system coexist while you're migrating functionality from one to the other. One of the problems that we had were there were architectural problems that made Friends unreliable. And so the new version of Steam, its approach to connections and how it manages connections should make Friends a lot more reliable. So, just from a technical perspective, it's evolving, and from a not annoying the hell out of our customer perspective, I think we're out of that hole. It certainly turned out to be a great way to sell products, right? I mean, we were worried that people wouldn't want to purchase products that way, and now that's not really a concern of ours. I think what we have to do is continue to look for ways to make Steam more valuable to people, right? To solve problems for people. There are huge numbers of support problems that we can just make go away by proactively solving them, but we still aren't, getting display drivers out to people automatically, which makes me crazy. It's like one of the biggest problems our customers have is the fact that they don't have an automatic update facility for display drivers. And it's been obvious, for a couple of years that needs to happen, and, yet we still don't have that.
Well, is Microsoft trying to address that with Longhorn? I mean, have
Great.
they talked to you about this? I figure they'd probably be talking to game developers.
I'd be more likely to be excited about NVIDIA or ATI saying that they were going to have solutions than expecting that Longhorn's going to wave a fairy wand over anything. I mean, they keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and I think expectations for sales of Longhorn are getting less and less. So, but that's an example of something that would clearly be valuable to customers, would solve problems for our customers. It would globally reduce everybody's support burden, and yet we haven't done it yet. Like, I had a conversation with some people at Microsoft recently, and I said, I cannot point to a single feature in Longhorn that I care about, right? There's nothing in Longhorn at all that solves any problems for us at all, And I had the same conversation with the Xbox 360 guys. It's like it's like the Xbox 360 doesn't make my life any better, and in fact, it makes it a lot worse. And you're telling me I can't rely on having a hard drive. And when I look at what I need to compete with, right? The most interesting game property right now is World of Warcraft. Huge retail sales and huge recurring revenue, and not only that, but they have a great experience wrapped around it. Whether it's their forums or community art or whatever, they're not only getting their customers to play the game, they're getting their customers to make the experience more valuable for other people who play the game. So I'll go up and download music and watch the movies that people have created and see fan art and do all these other things. So when I look at sort of what a platform needs to help a software developer do right now, it's figure out how to beat World of Warcraft. And when I look at the strategies that are being put forward by Microsoft on the system side or on the Xbox side or Sony or Nintendo, they're not making my life easier. Like, the PlayStation 3 makes my life as a software developer much harder. All of a sudden I'm supposed to figure out how to have this asymmetrical, multi-threaded game, right? And I've never written a single line of multi-threaded code ever, right? It's not like I was lying awake saying, I need to re-architect every line of code I've ever written in order to get it to work. So one of my junior programmers who's writing game code rather than system code could slow things down in a real world case, by a factor of 80, because they're doing something out in the AI or in the game DLL, which used to be totally safe. And now all of a sudden the whole system just slows down. And then one of the really experienced programmers have to go in and say, oh, you can't tell, but you're doing this, you ran out of registry space and this other thing happened, and no, there's no debugger that shows this to you. And writing for SPEs and writing in a PlayStation 3 environment, it's like there are incredibly few programmers who can safely write code in that environment. You make tiny little changes to code running on one of the SPEs and the entire thing will grind to a halt. And you have no visibility into why that's happening. It's just sort of magically running really, really slow. And it's also incredibly hard to architect things at the beginning so that you can distribute all of your functionality on all of these different processing units. This was not a problem that we were lying awake late at night saying, oh, we would really like to take this on right now. We were worried about little things like billing and forums and wikis and things like that, right? I totally see why Sony wants people to write code that runs on 7 SPEs and a central processing unit, because that code's never going to run well anywhere else, right? They're saying, make your code not run on anything other than one of ours, and we're betting that we'll have market share that's so high that everybody will have to write code for our platform, and other people will just starve the air from the other platforms by absorbing everybody's R&D budget and making their code less portable. Steam essentially was like, here are a set of tools that software developers need, focused on solving the problems that we have with these next generation of games. Billing, updates, product support, connecting our customers together, and things like that. I would think that for a lot of developers, things like Steam are going to be more interesting and solve more problems to them than this next generation of hardware and operating systems platforms. So, the Saturn came out, and that was intended to take this previous generation of games and create this super complicated chunk of hardware that would help you make the ultimate sprite-oriented game. And Sony came along and said, no, it's not a sprite problem anymore, it's a 3D graphics problem. And I think that a lot of developers are going to say, that's not the problem. That's another Sega Saturn. What we really need are problems with making our, how do we connect to our customers, get data from our customers, get updates to our customers, have closer relationships? How do we compete with the customer experience that you get out of being a WoW customer more than how do we, blast another set of pixels at what is essentially a 640 by 480 screen?
So, the end of Half-Life 2 killed me. I'm sitting there going, what happens next?
We found him.
Alex, where are you?
Half-Life 2 story-wise was a complete package. That everything the players promised from the get-go, where you're shown the Citadel when you leave the train station. It's clearly set up to be where your goal, where you're going to go, where your journey is going to end.
We felt like the ending of Half-Life 2 just couldn't be better, like especially in comparison to the ending of Half-Life 1, where there was no direct connection at the end with anything you'd seen at the beginning. Whereas we set out really intentionally to make a complete experience that from the moment, like the ending is implicit in the beginning. I understand that people felt like there was no denouement there where we go back in and kind of see everything from 100 miles up and see how it all fits together, but that's just the lead in and opening for Aftermath.
When we finished up Half-Life 1, and around that time when people were asking us what Half-Life 1 was when we were doing PR, the question on everyone's lips was, how many weapons do you have? That's what people asked us at the time. How many levels do you have? And now when people are asking us about Aftermath, they're saying, what happened to Alex? What happened after the Citadel?
If I ever let my guard down. Stalkers. I hope to God they can't remember what they were.
Aftermath is focused on Alex and your interactions with Alex. And so the bulk of the AI work we've done has all been on Alex. We spent a lot of time working on Alex's AI, and when we sort of finished it to the point where we felt that, you can play from the start of the episode to the end of the episode, she doesn't do anything stupid, she looks great, she helps you playtesters saying they like being with her, that's great. And we felt, we must be done now, right? And the reality is that we found that we've had to do this whole complete second pass. We've had to do significant work on just her speech AI, like when she decides to say things and like what triggers her to say things and how much does she handle and how much does Alex remember about what's happened and what she said and all that sort of stuff. I guess you could say we've been writing AI code, but it hasn't felt like AI code, it's felt like a personality code or, in a lot of ways.
We have to show personality through, what does she say when she's in combat and how does that create her as a character? What does she say while you're standing around trying to solve a puzzle? Like how to, and not just have a random comment, but have something that actually expresses your character and feeds into the player's experience.
Repetition is this thing which just kills, a character, because real people never repeat things, and they never repeat them in the same intonation or anything like that. So it's been a lot of work to do that. I mean, Alex is with you 100% of the way, essentially, and so that means while you're sitting in that room trying to figure out how to get out of that room for some finished puzzle, Alex has to do something. She can't just sort of stand there and suddenly switch off her ability to know what's going on in the world and stuff like that. We couldn't have tackled it until we'd built something like Half-Life 2, where we had to deal with these characters who had to do this, but for sort of chunks of the game here and there. Now we felt we could go off and take one character and say, all right, now we're going to do this with one character, and we're going to do it for the whole game. If the player can jump up here and go over there, then this character needs to be able to jump up and go over there. Aftermath certainly has a whole set of ideas in it that we cut out of Half-Life 2, or thought of while we were building Half-Life 2, or or reactions to things that we know that people liked a lot about Half-Life 2 and so on. So there's none of that stuff really ever truly dies.
Aftermath, from what I gather, is set entirely in City 17, and I know it's a big city, and there are probably aspects of it that we haven't seen before.
And the city is not the same city it was when you were last there. One of the fun things, it's always been fun as a game designer and in story to be able to take a space that we know the player knows fairly well at this point and change it in fundamental ways.
In some of the other expansion packs, you have this feeling that this kind of was in parallel to Gordon's adventure, but there might be some conflicts here. That's not the case with Aftermath. Everything in Aftermath is like core canon kind of stuff. Like this is us building this direct stuff. Every event in this game that we build is significant, because if you miss these, you're missing the progression of the story. This is how we're building the universe, is through this episode.
Don't worry.
We'll see about that.
Hi, my name is Gabe Newell, and I work at Valve. Now, I've been pretty outspoken in my comments about the current generation of game consoles. So I'd really like to thank everyone at Sony for their gracious hospitality and for not repeatedly punching me in the face.